All right, to get started, we're going to do this section on bank erosion and what are the causes that we see here in York County. So start off, what are the causes? We kind of narrowed it down to 5 specific ones that we see here in York County. Them being historic mills and legacy sediment, development, unestablished riparian buffers, damaged stream structures and neglected best management practices, and storm events and climate change. So historic mills. York County has a vast history in the milling industry. At one point, we had 300 active mills, and it was very important to the local, the farming industry and lumber industry here. These mills utilized the power of the creeks to power machinery. A lot of times this is for processing lumber and processing grain, mashing that grain down to some sort of refined product like cornmeal or flour. Currently, a large portion of the creeks in York County have eroding creek banks consisting of legacy sediment. This legacy sediment is inherited issue for most landowners. It's really not something that, something directly caused by the landowners. This is something that they inherited when they bought the land, or usually from around 200 years ago. So just to discuss how extensive the mill coverage is here in York County. Each one of these triangles are a mill dam. And I can go over what a mill dam is now. So basically, to control the rate of water that was flowing over their mill wheels, they would dam up a creek and then slowly pour the water through a sluice to control the rate. And what we see here is that water pours over the wheel, turns the machinery, and then that machinery then creates the product that they're looking to produce. So the term legacy sediment, basically, when these dams pull the water into these reservoirs, the silt from the water was able to settle down into the bottom of these reservoirs. And basically, when the dams became, when these mills became insufficient, and they were torn down, and the dams were torn down, basically this sediment turned into ground, was left there, and the streams then are cutting through this sediment. So at one point, what we're looking at is an old reservoir that now has no water on it and has a creek running through it. And the sediments that were usually on the bottom of that reservoir are now the stream banks. This is pretty common. This is one of our projects that we did in 2023. And you can see, we have a pretty steep cut bank of pretty soft, uniform silt. This is pretty typical of what we see here in York County in our legacy sediment areas. See, here's like an old site. This was just north of Dallastown. And you can see they all have mill dams. If anybody's familiar, this is along Springwood Road. This is kind of what we see a lot. We were lucky enough to find actually historical evidence that the mill was there. A lot of times we just have to look at the geology of the site. So indicators of legacy sediment, like I kind of briefed that in the earlier slide. Big one is vertically cut banks. This is a lot of times not natural, the sheer steepness of these banks. And then when we go and look at these banks, there's no soil horizons. When you dig a pit, generally there's the clay, there's the subsoil, the topsoil, the organic layer. This really doesn't have those layers. It's pretty much all one uniform, soil along this top layer. And it's usually constructed with very fine silt that has low structural integrity. Cannot stand well on its own and tends to collapse into the creek, thus making these big vertical, cut banks. And then another big one is the rock layer below this the legacy sediment. You can see this is all silty sediment, and then you hit this layer where it's just all rock and cobble. That is at the actual endemic stream bed. That's where that stream bed was before this legacy sediment was placed on top of it. And that's the natural layer of where the creek wants to go. Here's that picture blown up from the previous slide. This is on Bennett Run. You can see, the creek. You can kind of see the rock layer underneath the water there. That's kind of where the creek wants to be. That's where it was for hundreds and hundreds of years, thousands of years. And then the last 200 years, we placed this legacy sediment on top of it. And it's just kind of carving out, this essential dust. It's essentially dust or sediment. Another big impact that we see here in York County is development. There's the land has certainly changed in the last 200 years, whether that's deforestation for logging, for lawn expansion, for crop expansion, or for big construction projects. We're seeing more residential industrial structures than ever. A lot of paved and impervious surfaces, and unmaintained stormwater best management practices for those paved and impervious surfaces. Another big one is mining and drilling. Although we don't really see that down here in York County. It's definitely there's definitely an impact with that throughout the state. Another big one that we see is unestablished riparian buffers. So structures, activities that impact the stream bank stability. The big one being mowing up to the stream bank. So naturally, what we would see in nature is a stream, and then outside of the stream, there is a natural riparian area. A lot of this, composes of different species that were, adapted to living in this riparian area. Several adaptations include thick root structures that are able to hold onto the ground, so when the water floods, they don't get washed away. Another one is, very good at absorbing water and taking utilizing the flood water to help them grow. A lot of these species include cottonwoods, birch, aspen, spruce, willows, dogwoods, alder bushes, cranberries, gooseberries, sedges, grasses, and rushes. All these naturally existing plants are now in a lot of our streams here in York County are replaced with turf grass, and turf grass generally does not have a good enough root structure to maintain a healthy stream bank. And then a lot of the bigger trees that you see along the creek banks, are getting cut down, and that also takes a big big area of a big root structure that's allowing that to hold on to that the soil along that bank. It's taking that away, and creating less structural integrity for that creek bank. And then not a lot, because the state has taken action on illegally armoring and channelizing streams, but we see a lot of these old stream projects that kind of channelize the streams with concrete, or just a straight up riprap project. This changes the flow path of the streams and kind of speeds up the streams to where after it's done, after it flows through that channelized area, the amount of rate and speed that picked up is going to, pretty much blow out anything after that project. So, and then pretty much it comes down to less plants equals less diversity, and it becomes an unhealthy stream environment. You see here's one of the projects before we got there. Basically, this was a creek, and they didn't want it meandering naturally throughout the property, so they went with an excavator and cut it right through the property in a straight line. That making the water speed up and eroding the banks even faster. Along the creek banks, we have no woody vegetation. We have no big tree root structures. We only have small turf grass and invasive species coming in, all in which that don't have a robust root structure that can hold on to that creek bank. So this was experiencing pretty good bank erosion when we got there. And this is pretty typical what we see with a lot of York County streams. Majority of them have been manipulated at one point in their life, and a lot of them have these invasive species and don't really have the endemic species that are made to occupy that riparian area. Another big one that we see is damaged stream structures and neglected BMPs. What we see a lot in people's driveways and stream crossings are undersized stream crossing pipes. You can see down here, at one point, this pipe was probably a good size and managed that water flow. Now that, streams are changing and that stream was probably affected by another, impacting, another thing that impacts the flow. That stream structure is now being overwhelmed and actively polluting the stream, and honestly not creating a good infrastructure on the stream as well. We see a lot of this stuff, whether it's stream crossings or old bank armoring projects or a whole list of things. And then the big thing is with the amount of, and this was kind of touched upon, our development impacts or the impacts due to development. With the amount of development that we're seeing, we in York County, there's a very large number of best management practices to control the stormwater coming off of those impervious surfaces. And if those were not developed right or designed right, we see failures. And basically it is on that landowner to maintain it. And sometimes, they don't have the means to maintain it. And a lot of times they kind of act more harm than good. You can kind of see this here. This BMP looks like a stilling basin. All the water coming off of those houses are going into this basin, and then over time are slowly getting drained out of this outlet. While during a big rainstorm, looks like it got overwhelmed, and maybe there was some water that fell in between the cracks of this pipe in the soil here, and it collapsed. And this is becoming a net negative for the surrounding streams. So it's a big one that we see in more developed regions of Pennsylvania, like York County. So how are storm events and climate change affecting our bank erosion that we see here in York County? Flashy and large storm events are becoming way more common. You could see that most people that are living here can kind of see that within their lifetime. We're seeing large, hard storm events crashing through the county, flooding everything all at once, and then receding real quick. And it seems like we're getting like 1 or 2 or 3 of them a year. And it's becoming more frequent. Kind of the big thing is that a 100-year storm event now is more like a 10-year storm event. It seems like we're getting more and more. And then natural disasters. What we saw with, I believe in 2022, there was a big tornado that kind of ripped through the southern end of the county. That create a lot of fallen trees and woody debris that kind of bog down our creeks. This large woody debris is creating dams which meandered the stream off its course and crashed into the legacy sediment surrounding and create a lot of erosion. So these natural disasters and the more frequent flood events and stuff are really kind of taking a toll on our creeks here in York County. Here's a map of York County's creeks. All of them that are impaired or labeled as impaired by the state are in red. And you can see here in this southeast corner, that is like the Muddy Run or the Muddy Creek watershed. The reason why that is not red is because they were not assessed by a DEP. So there's very good chance that these are also impaired as well. So we have one of the most impaired, the most amount of impaired creeks per county in the state. So what are the effects, large and small, of this bank erosion? Relatively small is, naturally, a creek wants to meander. Creeks do not want to stay put in one area, and that's why the thought of a floodway is very important to the state. We want to preserve our creeks, but we also want to preserve the riparian areas around our creeks. So when that stream channel does end up meandering, it's not going into someone's house. It is going into just a wooded riparian area. But what we're seeing here in York County and throughout the state is, this is a natural process, this meandering. What we're seeing here, though, is unnatural, meandering at an unnatural state, and this is due to a few things, but a big one is the increased number of impervious surfaces that has to do with the development around the area. This limits infiltration. Naturally, the precipitation will fall onto a vegetated surface. That water can then percolate into the ground, get to the groundwater table, and then over a long period of time, that groundwater can then reach to the creeks, and it creates an increased level in the creeks. Now what we're seeing is the level of the lack of infiltration and the level of impervious surfaces. That water hits the impervious surface and then shoots straight down to the creeks and changes the flow of that creek, obviously to a lot flashier, a fast moving during rainstorms and then quick receding during periods of non-rain. This isn't good for the surrounding stream banks. This is what kind of cuts our stream banks and creates that erosion. And a lot of this time, a lot of this is also due to, like we said in that earlier slide, increase to the amount of precipitation that we're getting due to this climate change that we're experiencing. So big picture problems, this is kind of like sediment pollution. Displaced sediment sources kind of come from, the bank erosion, neglected construction sites. So, obviously the soil from the banks, when it gets eroded, washes into the stream and causes sediment pollution. Neglected construction sites, so if you have a big swath or a big area of unstabilized dirt, and when the rain hits, the rain washes that dirt into the creek, that would be considered sediment pollution. And then poor agricultural practices, traditional tillage, if done incorrectly or at a steep slope during rainstorm, that'll wash all that good soil, that good fertile soil, directly into our creeks, creating sediment pollution. What does this sediment actually do to the environment, though? Why do we consider it pollution? Because at some point, mud's going to get into the creek, and that's relatively natural process. Well, what we're talking about is accelerated sediment pollution. Sediment entering the creeks in which is not at a natural level. This unnatural amount of sediment gums up the rocky substrate that we see in a lot of Pennsylvania creeks. And then this pretty much effectively kills the habitat of keystone species like the macroinvertebrates. So macroinvertebrates are basically when you flip over a rock, you see all those creepy crawlies running away. That's kind of like the potato chip of the creek. Pretty much everything eats those bugs, and when you kill the habitat of those bugs, you're effectively killing a good portion of all the organisms that live in that creek. And what we're really left with is the organisms that can survive in a pretty low, a non-diverse creek. And it's not, and that wouldn't be considered healthy. So you can see fish, but if it's only carp and it's only, the only bugs that are living in there are dragonfly bugs or mosquito larvae, it's not considered a healthy creek. Another big one is sediment laying water heats up the creek faster. So here in Pennsylvania, the majority of the creeks were once wooded, and because they were constantly shaded by the leaf cover during the summer, a lot of the creeks didn't get over like that 70-degree mark. With native and natural creeks that we have here in Pennsylvania, a lot of the species cannot survive over that 70-degree mark. The main one being trout, salmonids, the brook trout, can't live past that 70-degree heat. And this is due to the fact that they can't, whenever water heats up, the dissolved oxygen inside the water is depleted, and they basically just suffocate to death. And what dirty water does is it works as it heats up the water. Basically, the sun rays hit the water and aren't able to, the heat radiating off of the bottom of the creek can't go through the sediment and reflect off, so that heat is trapped in there and creates kind of like a greenhouse effect, effectively killing warming up the water and killing these cold water species. Another big one, that sediment pollution, another big factor with sediment pollution is the nutrients within that sediment. So increased nutrient levels can cause what we call eutrophication. So these nutrients are phosphorus and nitrogen, basically found in manure and a lot of fertilizers. So if there is if there's fertilizers in that sediment that's going into the water, it can cause several pollution events. The big one being eutrophication. Eutrophication is the process of algae blooming into the water due to these increased nutrients. It's basically the water becomes so dense with nutrients that algae is growing to absorb these nutrients. Bacteria are able to eat and break down that algae, and there's so much bacteria that it depletes the water of dissolved oxygen and creates fish kills. This basically suffocates any fish that's in the water, and is when you go and see on the news these big algae blooms that in the Chesapeake, you see all these bait fish dead on the side of the shore. It's not necessarily because the algae is like poisonous or anything. It's mainly because they're taking up all the oxygen inside in the water and suffocating these fish out. Big sources of these nutrient pollution of these nutrients are obviously sediment laying runoff and legacy sediments going into the creeks due to bank erosion and poor stormwater management. And then like in smaller cases, you see landfill leachate and discharge from sewer systems, which we can find both here in York County. And affects the Susquehanna and the Chesapeake Bay. Sediment and nutrients run down the Susquehanna into the Chesapeake Bay, contributing to bay pollution. The bay is a very special habitat and is pretty pretty delicate, and anything that we do here in Pennsylvania affects the bay considerably. It affects, like I said, through eutrophication, through sediment pollution, affects a lot of the commercial fisheries down there, whether it's commercial sport fishing for striped bass or it's for mussels and crabs. They all do not do well with excess sediment, and obviously eutrophication kills them all because they have gills. This also too impacts the drinking water of around 18 million people in the Bay Area. So it's a combined effort through New York, Pennsylvania, and Maryland to try and reduce this amount of sediment pollution and nutrient pollution into the bay. So what are the challenges that landowners face when bank erosion is on their property? Like I stated earlier, a lot of the challenges that we see landowners face are infrastructure failure and property damage. Big one being stream crossings. At one point they worked good. Now they're not because that stream changed enough to where it washed it out completely. Another one is, at one point the stream was a small stream. Now it's becoming bigger because there's more water rushing to it at a time. And the brand new or the old barn that grandpa put in is now eroding due to the bank erosion. And the big one is woody debris. A lot of these private stream crossings kind of collect woody debris, and now the landowner has a big, almost like natural beaver dam that they have to get rid of, or else it's gonna redivert the creek into an area where the creek traditionally didn't run. Cropland and pasture loss. A lot of times we get calls from farmers and ranchers saying that the meandering creeks are diminishing their grazing land or diminishing their cropland. Or a lot of times, what was a creek is now the banks are now dispersing or disappearing. And created almost like a wetland in their pasture rather than like an actual channel, like a creek going through their pasture. They now have this big wetland created, and wetlands inside a pasture can create poor health conditions for livestock and unproductive pasture. Basically, the caloric outtake of navigating through a wetland for a cow to navigate through a wetland does not add up to the caloric intake of grazing, and could pretty much cause a little too much stress on the animal for it to grow efficiently at a timely manner. Another one that we see is lawns and unestablished riparian buffers. A lot of people give us a call and say, hey, like my lawn or my property value is going down because my lawn is disappearing into the creek. And a lot of times it's a pretty easy fix. Mowing up to the stream bank usually is the cause. People want that nice groomed look all the way up to their creek, but in reality, they also want to cut down trees. If that tree's dead or something, they pull the roots out and then they have an exposed creek bank. And then once that creek bank is exposed, the first thing that really pops up is invasive species with small roots, or a big stream or a big rain event goes to the stream and washes the creek bank away. So what we always like to try and do is promote healthy riparian areas, and we can work with that landowner to kind of you'll lose some of your yard because we're gonna we would recommend a healthy brushy looking riparian area, but you're probably not going to lose any more land to the creek. These also too excessive land loss on a creek bank generally creates a gravel bar. This gravel bar also leads to more and more severe bank erosion. It kind of grows the problem. The problem kind of gets worse and worse and worse over time, rather than just a one deal problem. So So kind of that's so common here in York County. The Watershed Alliance of York, Watershed Forestry Program, got together some money to offer a funding avenue to plant these riparian areas. It was offered in the summer of 2023 and the spring of 2024, and it was an extreme success. We offered we incentivized landowners to install forest riparian buffers. Funding covered also the removal of invasive species, and 5 years of maintenance. Basically, we gave people $6,000 an acre for every 100 to 300 trees planted in that acre. And we I believe we were working with $60,000, and we got that spent up pretty quick within a few months. So it was this extreme success. It kind of was a quick way to address one of the bigger problems that we have here in York County, and we are trying to get more money to do something similar like that in 2024. So please, if you have any questions, or have some similar problems, creek banks in your backyard or in your pasture land, need that riparian area, give us a call. We might have funding for it here in 2024. That's just a little add-on that we'd like to add to this, that we wanted to add on to this this section of the slide to keep you guys aware. And then the other big one is other general real estate concerns. So a lot of times bank erosion causes safety concerns. No one wants a big old 8-foot cut bank on their stream or on their property. It causes a safety hazard for kids, and the landowners could potentially be liable for anything that goes on there. A lot of people don't want to, if they have 4-wheelers or something like that, don't want to have that embankment there just in case someone were to drive off of it. Another big one that we see is residential structures built within the major flood zones. Same deal. 200 years ago, that stream wasn't there. Now it's, they open up the front door and it's about 10 feet away from their front lawn. That's a big one that we get from landowners a lot. So we're going to do a quick talk about plants. Kendra is going to host that and discuss further on the native and non-native plants that we just referred to.